The voices, the fires, and other unexpected eruptions lessened as my hormones quieted, but my unwillingness to learn the family business remained. It made my aunt anxious to have an untrained witch in the house, and it was with some relief that Sarah sent me off to college in Maine. Except for the magic, it was a typical coming of age story. What got me away from Madison was my intellect. I'd always been precocious, leading me to talk and read before other children my age, aided by a prodigious photographic memory which made it easy for me to recall the layouts of textbooks and spit out the required information on my tests. My schoolwork was soon established as a place where my family's magical legacy was irrelevant. I'd skipped my final years of high school and started college at 16. And then, I'd first tried to carve out a place for myself in the theater department, my imagination drawn to the spectacle and the costumes, and my mind fascinated by how completely a playwright's words could conjure up other places and times. My first performances were heralded by my professors as an extraordinary example of the way good acting could transform an ordinary college student into someone else. The first indication that these metamorphoses might have not been the result of theatrical talent came while I was playing Ophelia in Hamlet. As soon as I was cast in the role, my hair started growing at an unnatural rate, tumbling down from shoulders to waist. I sat for hours beside my college lake, irresistibly drawn to its shifting surface, with my new hair streaming all around me. The boy playing Hamlet became caught up in the illusion, and we had a passionate, though dangerously volatile affair. Slowly, I was dissolving into Ophelia's madness, taking the rest of the cast with me. The result might have been a riveting performance, but each new role brought fresh challenges. In my sophomore year, the situation became impossible when I was cast as Annabel in John Ford's "'Tis Pity She's a Whore." Like a character, I attracted a string of devoted suitors, not all of them human, who followed me around campus. When they refused to leave me alone after the final curtain fell, it was clear that whatever had been unleashed could not be controlled. I wasn't sure how magic had crept into my acting, and didn't want to find out. I cut my hair short. I stopped wearing flowing skirts and layered tops in favor of the black turtlenecks, khaki trousers, and loafers that the solid, ambitious pre-law students were wearing. My excess energy went into athletics. After leaving the theater department, I attempted several more majors, looking for a field so rational that it would never yield a square inch into magic. I lacked the precision and patience for mathematics, and my efforts at biology were a disaster of failed quizzes and unfinished laboratory experiments. At the end of my sophomore year, the registrar demanded I choose a major or face a fifth year in college. A summer study program in England offered me the opportunity to get even farther from all the things Bishop. I fell in love with Oxford, the quiet glow of its morning streets. My history courses covered the exploits of kings and queens, and the only voice in my head were those that whispered from books penned in the 16th and 17th centuries. This was entirely attributed to great literature. Best of all, none of this university town knew me, and if there were witches in the city that summer, they stayed well away. I returned home, declared a major in history, took all the required courses in record time, and graduated with honors before I turned 20. When I decided to pursue my doctorate, Oxford was my first choice amongst the possible programs. My specialty was a history of science, and research focused on the period when science supplanted magic, the age when astrology and witch hunts yielded to Newton and universal laws. The search for a rational order in nature rather than a supernatural one mirrored my own efforts to stay away from what was hidden. The lines I'd already drawn between what went on in my mind and what I carried in my blood grew more distinct. My aunt Sarah had snorted when she heard of my decision to specialize in 17th century chemistry. Her bright red hair was an outward sign of her quick temper and sharp tongue. She was plain-speaking, no-nonsense witch who commanded a room as soon as she entered it. a pillar of the Madison community. Sarah was often called to manage things when there was a crisis, large or small, in town. We were on much better terms now that I wasn't subjected to daily dose of her keen observations on human frailty and inconsistency. Though we were separated by hundreds of miles, Sarah thought of my latest attempts to avoid magic were laughable, and told me so. "We used to call that alchemy," she said. "There's a lot of magic in it." "No, there's not," I protested hotly. The whole point of my work was to show how scientific this pursuit really was. Alchemy tells us about the growth of experimentation, not the search for a magical elixir that turns lead into gold and makes people immortal. "If you say so," Sarah said doubtfully, "but it's pretty strange subject to choose if you're trying to pass as a human." After earning my degree, I fought fiercely for a spot on the faculty at Yale, the only place that was more English than England. Colleagues warned I had little chances of being granted tenure. I churned out 2 books, won a handful of prizes, and collected some research grants. Then I received tenure and proved everyone wrong. More important, my life was now my own. No one in my department, not even historians of early America, connected my last name with that of the first Salem woman executed for witchcraft in 1692. To preserve my hard-won autonomy, I continued to keep a hint of magic and witchcraft out of my life. Of course, there were exceptions, like the time I drawn on one of Sarah's spells when the washing machine wouldn't stop filling with water and threatened to flood my small apartment on Wooster Square. Nobody's perfect. Now, taking note of this current lapse, I held my breath, grasped the manuscript with both hands, and placed it in one of the wedge-shaped cradles the library provided to protect its rare books. I had made my decision to behave as a serious scholar and treat Ashmole 782 like an ordinary manuscript. I'd ignore my burning fingertips, the book's strange smell, and simply describe its contents. Then I decide with professional detachment whether it was promising enough for a longer look. My fingers trembled when I loosened the small brass clasp. Nevertheless, the manuscript let out a soft sigh. A quick glance over my shoulder assured me that the room was still empty. The only other sound was a loud ticking on the readings room clock. Deciding not to record Bookside, I turned on my laptop and opened up a new file. This familiar task, one that I'd done hundreds if not thousands of times before, was comforting as my list neat check marks. I typed the manuscript's name and a number and copied the title from the catalog description. I eyed its size and binding, describing both in detail. The only thing left to do was to open the manuscript. It was difficult to lift its cover, despite the loosened clasp, as if it were stuck to the pages below. I swore under my breath and rested my hand flat on the leather for a moment, hoping that Ashmole 782 simply needed a chance to know me. It wasn't magic, exactly, to put your hand on top of a book. My palm tingled, as much as my skin tingled when the witch looked at me, and the tension left the manuscript. After that, it was easy to lift the cover. The first page was rough paper. On the second sheet, which was a parchment, were the words Anthropologia, or a treatise containing a short description of man, in Ashmole's handwriting. The neat round curves were almost familiar to me as my own cursive script. The second part of the title, in 2 parts, the first anatomical, the second physiological, the second psychological, was written in a later hand, in pencil. It was familiar too, but I couldn't place it. Touching the writing might have given me some clue, but it was against the library rules, and it would be impossible to document the information that my fingers gathered. Instead, I made notes in the computer file regarding the use of ink and pencil in 2 different hands and the possible dates of the inscriptions. As I turned the first page, the parchment felt abnormally heavy and revealed itself as the source of the manuscript's strange smell. It wasn't simply ancient, it was something more, a combination of must and musk that had no name.